In this lecture and the next few lectures, we're going to talk about a vulnerability called XSS. XSS is short for cross-site scripting. This type of vulnerability allows an attacker to inject JavaScript into a page. So JavaScript is a programming language, and using this vulnerability, an attacker would be able to execute code written in JavaScript into a certain page, into a website. JavaScript is a client-side language, so when the code is executed, it will be executed on the client, on the user, on the person who is browsing the web page. It's not going to be executed on the server, so even if your code results into giving you a reverse shell, the shell will be coming from the user who is browsing the page, and it's not going to be coming from the website. So any code you write in JavaScript will be exploited or will run on the target user, on the people who see the pages, and not on the web server. So the web server is only going to be used as means of delivering the code. There's three main types of XSS vulnerabilities: persistent or stored, reflected, and DOM-based. The stored XSS gets stored into the database, so the code that you inject will be stored into the database or into the page, so that every time any person views that page, your code will be executed. And the reflected one, the code will only be executed when the target user runs a specific URL crafted or written by you. So you'll be manipulating some sort of URL and send it to a target. And when they run that target, when they run that URL, the code will be executed. The DOM-based results from JavaScript code written on the client. So the code will actually be interpreted and run on the client side without having any communication with the web server. These could be very dangerous because sometimes web servers apply some sort of security and filtration to check for XSS, but with DOM-based, the code never gets sent to the web server. So the code will be interpreted and run on the web browser without even interacting with the web server. And these will be present into websites that update their content without refresh. So we've all used websites where you put some sort of a string and it does a search without communicating with the web server. So if you're able to inject into that, then this injection will not be validated, so it'll be executed straight away and bypass all validations. So let's talk about how to discover these kind of vulnerabilities. The way to do this is you browse through your target and try to inject any text box or any URL that looks similar to this. So whenever you see a URL with parameters, try to inject these parameters or try to inject into text boxes. So let's have a look on a reflected XSS example. So these are the non-persistent, non-stored vulnerabilities where you have to actually send the code to the target, and once the target runs the code, it will be executed on their machine. So let's have a look on our DVWA website. I'm just going to make sure the security is set to low. I'm going to submit this. And then we're going to have an example of a reflected XSS. So as you can see now, you can put your name here for this text box, and it's just going to say hello. Now this is obviously just an example, but the idea is you can inject into text boxes. Also, if you have a look at the URL here, you'll see that it's a get, so you can inject into the URL as well. So let me start a leaf pad. And let's try to inject XSS code on this and see if the code will be executed. Or JavaScript code, sorry. So what I'm going to use is a very simple script. So we're using the script and a /script tag. Now there is a lot of ways into discovering these kind of vulnerabilities and a lot of ways to bypass filters, but for now we're just having a look at the basic case where we can inject a normal script. And I'm gonna say alert, which is just a function to give an alert, to give a text box. And I'm gonna say XSS. So I'm going to click on submit and we'll see if this code will be executed. And as you can see now, it's actually executing my code. So instead of saying hello Zaid here, it said hello, and my code has been executed and it produced this XSS. So we can do the same here. If you have a look on the URL, it actually already did it for us. But if we look at the URL here, it's just going to be a bit bigger there. We can see that the name has been now, obviously all of these characters are just HTML escape characters. And now if you send this URL to anybody, whoever views that URL, the code will be executed on their machine and it's going to say XSS. So let me show you here. You can also inject this in the URL. I just want to show you the whole idea of that. So we have script /script XSS. And if I hit enter, the code will be executed. So as I said, we can copy this and send it to a certain person. And once they run that code, this code will be executed on their machine. Okay, now let's have a look on a stored XSS example. Now, stored XSS is very similar to a reflected one. It allows you to inject JavaScript code into the browser. The code is executed on the people that visit the page. The only difference is with the reflected, you had to send the URL to your target. So the target had to actually click on a URL for the exploit to run or for the code to run. In the stored XSS, the code will actually be stored into the database or into the page. So every time any person runs that page, they will see your code and your code will be executed. So you won't need to interact with any users or send them anything. Therefore, this could be much more dangerous than reflected XSS. So let's have a look on this. Now, I clicked on the XSS stored here on the left, and you have this page. And this page just allows you to add a message to the system. So I'm going to put my name as Zaid. We're just going to do a normal test first. And we're going to put a message body, for example. And then I'm going to sign the guest book. And you can see that Zaid added a message called message body. So if we go to here into another machine, so this is a different machine into a different place. And if we go on the XSS stored, we can see that there's two entries. So the entries are being loaded from the database and that they contain the entries in that database. So if we manage to inject code in here, then any person who runs this page, the code will run on it without even having to send that person anything. So let's try to inject stuff here. So let's put my name as Zaid. And I'm going to try to put my code in here. So I'm going to try to inject into the message. And I'm going to put it as script. I'm going to use the exact same test code that we used in the previous video. Just a message saying XSS. Again, very basic code. But it serves for the purposes of this video. And we're going to say alert XSS. And I'm going to try to sign the guest book. And as we can see now, I got the XSS here. But the real magic happens when a normal person, so let's just go home first. And let's assume this is just a normal website and people just are coming and browsing it. And once they're going to go to the guest book, JavaScript code will be executed on their system from that website. So the code is coming from that website and it's going to be executed on every person that visits this page. Again, we're just showing a proof of concept here. In future videos, we'll show how to further exploit this kind of vulnerability.